Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar this Tuesday evening. I am Mary Stewart. I'm the Service Manager from the Planning and Environment Service within Aberdeenshire Council, and I'd like to welcome you all to this second in a series of 3 webinars under the banner Easing Lockdown Business Support. And this is specifically aimed at assisting you or your business to reopen as lockdown eases in line with the government's phasing. Just by way of background, we have established a cross-service strategic group within Aberdeenshire Council, and this is to enable businesses wishing to reopen following lockdown within Aberdeenshire to seek assistance and find relevant information on any requirements to reopen and or adapt their business operations. The aim is to give you the ability to direct all inquiries to one space and to receive a one council response to assist you moving forward. There is a dedicated inbox to forward your inquiries and also a dedicated web page with a variety of relevant bits and pieces of information. These details will be available on a slide you should see shortly. The group itself consists of all the necessary services, including economic development, licensing, environmental health and trading standards, planning, building standards, transportation, roads and landscape, and a representative from legal services and area manager input. The aim is for the group to deal with inquiries strategically, making the process of reopening as streamlined as possible and to help reduce timescales on any necessary decision-making processes. We very much appreciate the difficult and challenging times that you find yourselves in, and hopefully we can assist in some way to making the process, at least in some part, less stressful. Tonight's webinar is in fact a repeat of the first webinar we had last Thursday. We felt that there was such an interest that we would give the opportunity again for those who perhaps could not manage last week, or indeed to others who have become aware of the webinars in the last week. We have input and presentations from Paul Williamson, who's a senior planner, Louise Cunningham, who's a team manager for environmental health, Gavin Alexander is a Trading Standards Officer, and Catherine Busson, who's a Senior Environmental Health Officer, and Lisa Gondini, who's a Civic Licensing Officer. All of those officers will be giving advice and guidance as to how their respective services can assist, and we also have others as part of our panel who will be on hand to answer any questions. So just before we join Paul, if I can touch on some housekeeping. This webinar engagement is based on written questions only, and this is via the live event Q&A facility. So if I could please ask that all your questions could be submitted by the live event Q&A facility or button and not the chat facility. In this way, this keeps all the questions in the same place. All the questions that we receive during the presentations will be managed at the end of all the presentations, and that way we will be able to manage who the best person will be to respond. And please appreciate that we can only take the questions pertaining to the topic of this evening, which is business reopening. And while I understand there may be other burning questions, we must keep on topic. However, in the event of any of the questions not being answered, and that's whether that's through time limitations or further work or information is required, we do intend to gather those together and publish them on a Q&A section on the webpage after the event. Also, each of the webinars will be recorded and links made available on the dedicated webpage so you can listen back or indeed make others aware. So without further ado, we can get started, and I will firstly hand you over to Paul Williamson from the Planning Service to start the presentations. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Mary. As Mary outlined, I'm Paul Williamson, one of the senior planners within development management, primarily dealing with planning applications across Kincardine, Mearns and Mar, but happy to answer queries on a wider planning basis. As you shall already know, the world that we live in has changed a great deal over the past 3 months in lockdown. This has not only fundamentally affected our personal lives, but also the way in which we work, shop and interact with one another. As further details of the Scottish Government's route map to easing lockdown restrictions are rolled out, infrastructure services are collectively looking at how we can assist the wider business community in moving forward and help them to regain some lost ground and revenue as a direct result of the lockdown. One element of that is through the planning system. Some businesses have already undertaken measures to adapt their business models and working practices. For example, to provide takeaway services for restaurants and eateries. However, other businesses, such as non-essential retailers and pubs, shall now be looking to adaptation measures that they themselves can implement in order to work towards recovery and reopening. In parallel, the Scottish Government, via the Chief Planner, has already issued a guidance upon the pragmatic approach that requires to be taken within the regulatory framework of the planning system. This has included taking a light touch approach to businesses which have restrictions in their hours of operation or delivery timescales. A strong emphasis has also been placed upon recognising the role that the planning system has in enabling business operations to get back up and running, and those that need to diversify and adapt in order to do so. As such, the planning system can support well-measured temporary solutions, and we are willing to consider all proposals while taking as pragmatic a view as possible to any solutions tabled. This may include, as an example, for a temporary use for on-street seating for cafes, bars or similar, to accommodate social distancing, or a seasonal variation to business operations. However, beyond any relaxation in planning to support temporary changes, there may of course be some matters that still require consideration through other consenting and licensing regimes, which shall be touched upon later. In considering the types of measures that businesses may want to introduce, cognizance shall be made of the permanency of aspects considered to involve development, such as canopies or gazebos, and whether or not they are located within the curtilage of an existing property. If proposals are seeking to create permanent seating areas out with existing curtilages or business areas, then planning permission may be required. Proposals which involve footpaths and public car parks may need separate consents. Furthermore, we shall continue to investigate complaints that are received at this time, but shall also actively seek to help resolve disputes to help find solutions. In respect of existing controls which are the subject of conditional aspects such as hours of operation, the planning service would have to balance consideration such as protecting existing amenity, for example, through noise and odour. We would endeavour to be as pragmatic and flexible in the short term, although it may be the case that further, more detailed discussion be necessary for longer term or permanent solutions. We as a council have already seen a number of inquiries and approaches made by a number of businesses, with some having already submitted planning applications for the likes of permanent structures for the sale of food and drink. Some further advice is also available on the Council's website, a dedicated page for reopening businesses which covers proposals on footpaths, public car parks or roads, together with advice in respect of takeaway vans and kiosks. Where instances are identified that planning applications shall be necessary, there are statutory procedures to follow, and we can help give further advice as to likely timescales involved. Such applications must also follow the due process and allow the involvement of consultees and the public or others who may wish to make representation. We would therefore have to determine applications in accordance with the Council's agreed scheme of governance as to which means we can determine such applications, whether that be via delegated powers or via an area committee. However, we can keep applicants fully appraised during these processes. As such, the Cross-Service Infrastructure Strategic Group is available to seek assistance, provide information, and to provide a one council response between all of the necessary services. Any queries that you may have should be sent to the newly set up email address easinglockdownsupport@aberdeenshire.gov.uk, where collective input shall be pulled together in order to provide a fuller response to help answer your business queries and provide appropriate advice during these challenging times. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go on to the next presenter, and that's Louise Cunningham. And Louise is a Senior Environmental Health Officer. Over to you, Louise. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Scottish Government introduced the Health Protection Coronavirus Regulations Scotland, of which environmental health officers and trading standards officers are authorised under these regulations. Our primary role within this piece of legislation is to assist businesses with complying with these requirements set out in the legislation and ensure that you have the appropriate controls in place to prevent any further spread of coronavirus whilst allowing our economies to restart. In addition to the information that you'll hear from colleagues tonight, there are a number of key web pages on the Council webpage that will also assist you in ensuring that you have the correct controls in place and are ready to reopen within the correct phase. Particularly the Workplace Guidance page, which has links to the sector-specific guidance published by the Scottish Government. Just to add that we receive this guidance when you do, as an example of this, the hospitality guidance was issued just shortly after our previous webinar last week. So as soon as this is released, we are circulating it within our social media channels and ensuring the webpage is updated with as much information as possible as to what this means for your business. But at any stage at all, the earlier the better, please do get in touch with any of the services and we'll guide you the best we can. I'll hand over to Gavin, who is going to take you through some sector-specific guidance for the retail sector.
Evening, my name's Gavin Alexander. I'm from Trading Standards. I'm also joined by Marley McPherson, one of my colleagues who's a Senior Enforcement Officer. As Louise said previously there, we've been working alongside environmental health under Part 2 of the regulations on closure for businesses. As businesses start to open up over the next few weeks, we're expecting to receive far more questions on how businesses should open, what manners of businesses can open, and what they need to have in place in order to satisfy the regulations. At the moment, it seems that far more retail shops will be opening from the 29th. The Scottish Government has now issued some retail sector specific guidance which is available on their website. Obviously, during this period, businesses are having to adapt and change the way that they have been operating. From businesses previously that would just be local shops now going on to conduct distance sales and either have click and collect systems or delivery methods. As always ongoing, fair trading regulations have to be complied with as best possible. We try to take a pragmatic approach again in dealing with businesses on these matters, as we understand that a lot of the infrastructure and technology required will not be available to businesses who are conducting distance sales. Weights and Measures has also seen an influx of inquiries, especially from the bar trade regarding collection and beer deliveries. Again, that falls into the realms of licensing as well, but there are specific measures which should be taken in line with guidance that we've been providing under the, well, to combat really the issues that exist with the intoxicating liquor order from 1988 on that as well. The things that we would urge business to do is to not take any advice from other businesses who may appear similar. All businesses in these sectors should be conducting relevant risk assessments to ensure that any action that they're taking is tailored to their business. What works for one may not necessarily work for another. For any pre-existing trading standards legislation, there is a good online resource called the Business Companion, which can be used for traders to look up general advice on regulations. However, more in-depth information can be sought from Trading Standards at our email address, tradingstandards@aberdeenshire.gov.uk. And any further questions regarding lockdown, as previously mentioned, should be directed to easing lockdown support at aberdeenshire.gov.uk. So I think it's Catherine after me, so I'll pass on there.
Thanks, Gavin. I've been asked to provide some guidance and advice and provide links to information which may help you when it comes to reopening your food business if you haven't done so already. So when lockdown started back in March, the Health Protection Coronavirus Scotland Regulations 2020 allowed for food businesses to remain open for takeaway and delivery purposes for the duration of the lockdown period, as long as there were strict physical distancing measures that could be implemented within the business. To date, there is no evidence to suggest that COVID-19 can be transmitted through food. So moving through the phases and easing of restrictions, last Thursday, the 18th of June 2020, it was announced by the First Minister that Scotland would be entering phase 2 of the Scottish Roadmap to Recovery. Currently, it stands that businesses who are offering takeaway foods cannot provide an area where food can be consumed on the premises. So this includes both inside and outside seating areas and applies to all food businesses. Food should be consumed off of the premises, and this includes not permitting customers to use any land owned by the business, such as lawns or anything like that. Again, that would be deemed to be encouraging a congregation of people at the moment. This is to be reviewed on the 2nd of July 2020, when further information is to be released on the use of outdoor seating areas for food and drink, as well as we're hoping to get further advice on the 2-metre physical distancing, which will impact your business, particularly in regards to staffing and working within a food business. So physical distancing requirements, as you're all aware by now, it requires individuals from different households to keep a 2-metre distance from each other and applies to the workplace and customers. As a food business operator, you should consider the workforce, how many individuals are working in the premises to permit the social distancing requirements within the business. You should also consider accessibility to facilities such as provision of toilets and wash hand basins, and controls such that we've seen being implemented in businesses have included staggering working hours and work breaks, and using the same individuals on the same shift patterns to reduce staff mixing within the workplace, as well as implementing controls in the kitchen. It's also important to think how, if you change any workflow due to COVID controls, how this may impact in terms of cross-contamination. So it's important to ensure that food safety is not compromised. And again, this may influence your decision on reopening if you haven't done so already. So risk assessment and procedures. So before opening, as Gavin said, you should be undertaking a risk assessment. So this basically involves identifying hazards associated with the transmission of COVID-19, looking at suitable control measures and ensuring that they can be effectively implemented within the business. And it should be suitable and sufficient in terms of the health and safety legislation. It's important that staff are made aware of the control measures and trained accordingly. Otherwise, if you have all the procedures in place and staff haven't been trained, then you're not going to effectively help control and reduce the risk of spread of the virus within your premises. And this will help provide a safe working environment for both staff and customers. Control measures will differ slightly for each business. As it's been said before, a generic risk assessment isn't suitable, and you should make it site specific for that as well. Control measures have typically included sneeze guards at till areas, limiting the number of visitors into the premises, and it's your responsibility to ensure how you can ensure the 2-metre physical distancing remains both inside and outside the premises as well. Enhanced cleaning of common touch surfaces should be undertaken, and you should, as part of your food safety management system, you should review and enhance your cleaning schedule. High contact surfaces would include door plates, fridge freezer doors, and any card readers from the customer side of thing. Again, if you're encouraging reducing the amount of cash you're going to be handling. Documentation, food safety management system should be reviewed if things have changed significantly from your normal operations that were observed during your last EHO inspection. In particular, refer to the personal hygiene section and update this to reflect the infection control in relation to coronavirus, in particular the reporting of illnesses, hand washing and returning to work following illness. Similarly to the trade standards legislation, despite the pandemic, all existing legislation in regards to food hygiene and food standards still apply. So you should also ensure that checks are undertaken prior to reopening, and any collections such as waste collections which may have been cancelled during the outbreak have been reinstated. Consider a deep clean of the premises and make sure that any stock that you have on the site remains in date and suitable to be used. So looking forward, thinking about the service of food, to reduce the risk of transmission, it'd be recommended to use single-use equipment such as paper cups and portion condiments. For example, a salt cellar can provide a common touch surface, providing a surface that could potentially spread the virus. You should consider the storage and packing of raw materials and packaging. Again, some of your storerooms may be quite small and you're not used to handling and storing so much takeaway cutlery, cups and paper plates, for example. As the use of the outdoor seating area is utilised further down the line, you'll have to think about cleaning regimes for these areas, and even things such as menus. Will these be disposable? Will you be utilising an app system for ordering food? And thinking about how you can reduce surfaces being contacted by multiple people. Allergens, you're still required to provide this information. Given the recent difficulties in obtaining ingredients, you should review your allergen information to ensure it's up to date, to reflect changes in suppliers and different ingredient brands. It's quite amazing how many allergens are present in different brands of the same product, so make sure that's information is provided to the customer. Advice in regard to risk assessments can be found on the Health and Safety Executive's website. They've got a lot of good tools that will help your business prepare for reopening, thinking about Legionella if you haven't used water systems and that sort of thing. Food Standards Scotland, they provide a risk assessment tool and checklist, which is a good resource, and we've been recommending to a lot of businesses to utilise this resource and kind of give yourself a peace of mind that you have implemented all the necessary controls before reopening your business. Guidance on any infection control and use of PPE can be provided on the HSE's website, and Health Protection also provide advice for non-healthcare settings. Unfortunately, we're unable to provide advice in terms of what PPE should be used within a business, and this again should be done and incorporated as part of the risk assessment. It is recommended at the moment for people to wear face coverings in shops. However, in Scotland, it's only mandatory to wear on public transport currently. Again, we're not sure if this is due to change, and you'll be updated as we are by the First Minister's briefings. It must be emphasised, though, that the use of PPE such as gloves are not a substitute for hand washing. Hand washing is one of the most effective infection control measures. You may wish to use hand sanitisers as an extra defence. However, this should not replace hand washing within a food business, in particular where raw and ready-to-eat foods are handled. Scottish Government have provided sector-specific guidance, which will become more available as we go through the phases. How can we help? Contact us at environmental@aberdeenshire.gov.uk for specific information relating to the reopening of your food business. If it's a multi-agency approach it's required, i.e. for a licensed premises looking to utilise an outdoor area for seating in a couple of weeks' time, then please email easinglockdownsupport@aberdeenshire.gov.uk. We've also been using social media channels and our website to provide the latest links to the most up-to-date information. So I'd suggest you have a look on there as well. We'd also ask food businesses to contact us for advice if they are looking to change their business model since the last inspections. And if they're looking to reopen as well, we're happy to discuss your proposals. I'll now pass over to Lisa Cunningham, Civic Licensing Standard Officer, to advise of the licence implications of COVID.
Thank you, Catherine. So, as Catherine said, my name's Lisa Cunningham. I'm one of the Civic Licensing Standards Officers. I am one of a team of 4 who covers the whole of Aberdeenshire area, and we work predominantly with the Licensing Scotland Act 2005, as well as the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982. We work closely in particular with the licensing, environmental health and trading standards teams, as well as external agencies such as Police Scotland and NHS. So that's a wee bit background about me. So let's move on to the presentation itself, I guess. So the Aberdeenshire Licensing Board, subcommittees and area committees wish to support local businesses as much as possible within the legal frameworks that exist, where it is safe to do so, and of course trying to minimise opportunities for COVID-19 to spread. So with the announcement today of easing into phase 2, so phase 2 easing of restrictions looks set to allow outdoor markets to open from 29th of June, but only once guidance is implemented, and it looks like we are awaiting that at the moment. All markets, whether indoor or outdoor, must be licensed. And if this is a consideration for your business, please do not hesitate to get in contact with the licensing team in order to speak through your proposal on how to apply for a license. You may find that additional permissions are also likely to be needed, such as written consent from landowner and potentially planning permissions. It was also announced today that from Monday the 22nd of June, it will be mandatory for face coverings to be used on all public transport. This includes drivers of taxis and private hire vehicles unless there is a shielding divide between the driver and the passengers. The route map also stated that in phase 2, pubs and restaurants may also open outdoor spaces with physical distancing and increased hygiene routines, and this is where, from a licensing perspective, is a large focus at this moment in time. Looking at what phase 2 potentially looked like previously, and along with the updates announced today, the licensing team are equipped to assist businesses to open outdoor areas when the Scottish Government gives the go-ahead. Sadly, today's announcement did not offer any further guidance on when that may be or what measures are expected to be put in place, other than a further review will take place on the 2nd of July. However, this does give businesses the opportunity to review their businesses, apply for licenses required, place COVID-specific risk assessments into place, put physical distancing measures in place, increase hygiene measures for staff and customers, and of course spend time training staff in a whole different way of working. Accommodation can also now be provided from Monday the 22nd of June for those requiring to stay away from home for work purposes. However, it is our understanding that public spaces within the accommodation would still not be permitted to be used. So if a licence holder has an outdoor area that they wish to utilise to sell or serve alcohol that is not covered by their premises licence, the Aberdeenshire Licensing Board will accept an occasional licence application for the outdoor area. There are some areas such as Peterhead and Fraserburgh which have bylaws in place, which also means that any consumption of alcohol in a public place, including outdoor areas attached to a premises, must be covered by either an occasional licence or a premises licence. Please be aware prior to submitting your applications that you may also require other permissions from the Council, such as consent to use pavements or temporary planning permissions, and guidance can be sought contacting the business support email address. Any occasional licence that is granted will be subject to conditions relating to the outdoor area, as well as a condition that the licence holder will comply with any government guidance relating to coronavirus, including physical distancing and increased hygiene measures. As part of your opening plan, all businesses are encouraged to undertake COVID-19 specific risk assessments and implement necessary control measures in the workplace, including consultation and training staff in any of these measures. Where possible, these should be submitted alongside your occasional licence application, or if no occasional licence application is required, they should be available for any authorised officer to inspect. Whilst we are awaiting further guidance, we are under the impression that use of marquees and domes will not be permitted to be used in outdoor areas during phase 2, as these structures are wholly or partially closed premises and therefore may not meet the regulations for outdoor spaces. We would also look for business to think carefully about the use of structures such as awnings, canopies, umbrellas and gazebos, especially when positioning next to or attached to walls or other structures. Having sides to a gazebo, for example, is creating an indoor space. For those of you who are familiar with the occasional licence application process, you will be aware that we expect applications to be lodged at least 6 weeks prior to the dates required. We appreciate that this is difficult for businesses to apply in advance of a date that is as yet unknown, so the teams and consultees are committed to turning around applications as soon as possible. However, we are unable to grant applications for at least 7 days from the commencement of consultation. There is obviously no guarantee that applications can be processed for a specific date in the application if the application is submitted with short notice, but we are obviously doing our best to try to get them turned around as quickly as possible. So all applications must still go through the normal consultation process, and if any objections or representations, once we move through phase 2 and into phase 3, we will revert back to the normal timescales for processing occasional licences. The relaxation is only for the use of unlicensed outdoor areas which are attached to a licensed premises. So the Scottish Government will conduct a review on the 2nd of July based on scientific advice on potentially higher transmission risk activities and settings, including opening outdoor hospitality space safely, which will include beer gardens and on-street seating. So for the time being, we are all we can do is watch this space, as they say. We have no further information, unfortunately, than you do. Aside from easing into phase 2, there has also been some adjustments to the Licensing Scotland Act 2005 with the introduction of the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020, which has relaxed some timescales for a limited period of time. These include temporary closures of premises, provisional premises licenses, change of premises manager, transfers, and personal licence refresher and renewal applications. Further details can be found on the listing pages of the Aberdeenshire Council website, but please note that some of these relaxations can only be applied for if written requests are submitted to the Licensing Board for consideration. Any request for extended time must relate to COVID-19, and it is the Licensing Board's discretion whether or not to grant additional time. There is not a blanket extension granted, so please ensure you contact one of the licensing standards officers to talk through your situation. If you want to get in contact with a licensing standards officer, and many of you may already have contact details, but if not, you can get us on a simple email address of lso@aberdeenshire.gov.uk, or if your query possibly relates to more than just licensing, then we would recommend that you use the business support email address. Thank you.
So thank you to all the presenters there, and hopefully you found the information useful and of benefit. Now going over to the questions, and firstly thank you for taking time to post questions. Now the first one is this is from a business that's in fact a book charity who deliver educational books worldwide. They have recently opened a bookshop on High Street in Banff. However, they haven't heard any word from the government as yet whether that type of shop can indeed open. And I believe, Marlene, you could answer or deal with this question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I can. Thank you. As we move into phase 2, all retailers are allowed to open subject to guidance from the 29th of June. So from Monday, the bookshop would be able to open subject to the guidance. The guidance was published on the 19th and includes information, COVID-19 checklist and operational guides, things that you would have to put in place before you open on the 29th, looking at risk assessments, social distancing, the cleaning of the shop. So basically going into phase 2, all retail shops that can be accessed from the pavement will be allowed to open from the 29th.
Okay, thank you for that, Marlene. On to the next question here. And that is from someone who's interested in more information for erecting a temporary gazebo for outdoors for small group exercise when the government allows this to happen. They would only be utilising it for, say, 1 or 2 hours a day. Now, Paul Williamson from Planning, I think you'd be able to give a response to that one, please.
Yeah, no problem at all. Certainly in an instance such as that, it's an example of one where we'd need to have a little bit more information just to exactly where the kind of temporary gazebo would be sited, whether that be on your own personal property or whether it be located kind of elsewhere, such as in a public park. We'd be more than happy if you wanted to direct your question to us within planning at aberdeenshire.gov.uk. It's probably not one that's going to require the wider input of all the groups, but we could certainly just ascertain that from the initial information that you provide. But we'd look to turn that round as quickly as we can.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Paul. Another question here is from a multi-arts charity based in Banchory, and they have a small retail outlet, and they're wondering if there's any funding available to help with physical distancing infrastructure for PPE and other COVID protocols. And I believe Alistair Reid from our Economic Development can deal with this question. Thanks, Alistair.
Yeah, thanks. I got that there. Yeah, this is a question which we've been asked a few times, and the answer, the short answer is unfortunately no. We're being asked to feed back to central government areas that we could possibly or repurpose underspent grants that are already there. Some of the grant funding that's out is there hasn't been spent as widely as we expected. So in anticipation that might be repurposed, we're being asked to feedback, give some suggestions, and that's certainly one of the areas that we're suggesting. It's certainly an area where we're getting a few questions in, so we would hope to, can't promise anything, but certainly if there's any change of these circumstances, would be letting everyone know of the changes, but not possibly, probably not the answer you would hope to that particular business.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. And I think the next question is probably directed to you as well. And this is from a business that recently applied for a grant worth $15,000 to assist with loss of income, but unfortunately that application was refused. However, they've been contacted today regarding whether they had applied for another grant worth $10,000, and they're wondering if this grant is aimed at those who have charity status, and if this is the case, could they apply for this? I'm wondering if you could answer that one, Alistair.
Probably without just having the details of that, I would probably not give a definitive answer. But if the questioner can leave details, we can certainly get back and look into the specific details. There's quite a few grants around just now, and eligibility criteria is strict. It's fairly binary in many cases. We don't have a lot of wiggle room, but certainly we can have a look at that one and get back to the person who's posed that question.
Thank you, Alistair. Another question that's just come in, this is from someone who has an upholstery business which involves home visits. So they're looking for any guidance that will be forthcoming in terms of whether they'll be able to carry out the home visits, or should they just look to stick to the general distancing guidance. So any general advice for that, please, and possibly Catherine, would that be right? One for you?
We haven't received any guidance yet in regard to the businesses doing home visits. That is probably something that's going to possibly come out later on, but I'm not aware of anything that has come out just yet.
Okay, thank you. But as we've said previously, any relevant guidance that does come out, we will immediately put that on to the relevant webpage or links to the relevant sites so that you have that information as it comes into our shelves. I've been asked to point out that a couple of questions ago about funding in terms, and I'm sure Alistair will give you that information if you can give him your information, is basically directing to the Business Association, as there are town funds available, which the business associations, I believe, are pulling together a bid for. So there's some additional information, but I'm sure Alistair will cover that in his response to you. Now, again, on the topic of funding, it's been indicated that there's no current grant scheme for single site businesses with rateable values of more than 51,000. The question is, will the help offered to small businesses and multi-site businesses be extended to businesses which fall into this category? Alistair, I believe that's probably one for you as well.
Yeah, and again, this is a subject we've been contacted on a number of occasions, and again, it's a line in the sand that if you're over a certain amount of rateable value, you are excluded, and if you're under, you're included. That we've had no indication that that's going to be changing, but again, it's one of the things that we're feeding back fairly regularly, that we're getting asked that sort of thing by businesses. So again, watch this space. If it's if there is any change in that, we'll be promoting that through the usual channels.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Right, we have a question here. Basically, it's how do we envisage toilets operating when a business is allowed to open? Say, if it's an outdoor beer garden, what would be the suggestion or the advice to be given in terms of operating of toilets? And Louise, I think that's maybe one for you.
Hi, Mary. Yes, thank you. The hospitality guidance was issued by Scottish Government on Thursday evening, and at the moment the section on toilets remains short in that it is awaiting further scientific advice before advising on how these will be able to be operated once beer gardens expect to reopen. As a minimum, businesses should be thinking ahead to the hand contact surfaces and looking to minimise those. Now might be a time that you're in a position to invest in non-hand operated taps, and with an emphasis on disposable towels for drying hands. Going forward, as soon as that information is available, and that will be widely publicised, as it will be scientific advice provided to Scottish Government on those decisions, we will ensure that that's circulated. As an aside, at the moment, all public toilets within Aberdeenshire Council remain closed during phase 2, and we also await further guidance on how these can be safely opened to residents going forward.
Thanks very much, Louise. And again, once there's more guidance available there, that will be made available on the relevant websites for you to access. Another question, and this is from a business that's a small coffee shop, and at the moment it's not, well, it won't be possible to do social distancing when they are allowed to open because of the size of the coffee shop. The question here is when can they open? And I guess that will be in relation to the phasing that's ongoing, but possibly another one for Catherine there.
So obviously where ideally you need to have social distancing in place with the 2 meters. This is possibly going to be under review, and we do expect another announcement in the next couple of weeks from the First Minister. You'll be aware today there's been changes in England, so it's just waiting to see. I believe I saw something on BBC today that the First Minister is reviewing kind of the guidance in regard to the spread of the virus, so that may impact on how, if the 2 meter social distancing is changed. In regard to workforce within a business, you can look to see if you've got any people from the same family that are able to work. Again, that social distancing 2 metre wouldn't apply to them. It might be if you have a big workforce that you try and reduce the menu to manage workstations and work within that. But it is very much a kind of dynamic situation at the moment, and we are waiting for further information coming through the government for that.
Thanks, Catherine, and I'm going to keep you busy here because I think this is one for you. Whether there's any guidance on staff members who cannot wear face masks due to health reasons, such as, for example, asthma. Could you give some advice on that, Catherine, please?
Yep, that would again come down to risk assessment as to determine whether or not PPE is needed. Again, it might be a business policy that PPE is required. We ourselves wouldn't provide any guidance or recommendations if PPE should be worn or not. If it's because of a health issue, it would be worth contacting your doctor, or there is information online from Health Protection Scotland who have detailed infection control and the use of PPE in non-healthcare settings. So that's probably worth having a look at in regard to that as well.
Thank you, Catherine. A question here, which I think is probably directed to Paul in planning. Basically, putting out outdoor seating on private land that doesn't affect public roads or pavement. And the question is that just down to the decision of the landowner, or are there other permissions that may be required?
Yes, certainly in an instance such as that, we would be looking for some further information. If it's on land that's not within, the curtilage of an existing house or an existing business premise, then there is a significant potential that planning permission would be required for that. So it's one that I think would be recommending that you'd put to the generic email address. That way we can do a coordinated response and then just highlight all of the appropriate consents and regimes that you would need to follow in that instance.
Thank you, Paul. And it looks this is one of the last questions at the moment. And Catherine, I think it's for you again. It's basically, are people allowed to try on clothes and footwear? And if not, what would be done with the goods?
That'd probably be one best to be answered by Marlene or
apologies, that's a trading standards. Gavin or Marlene, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, sorry. We're still looking for a bit more guidance when it comes to how that would affect any consumers' rights in regards to inspecting of goods. Technically, when you buy goods from a shop, you don't necessarily have a right of rejection because it would be assumed that you would have inspected the goods to a suitable standard. But the question was then posed with clothing. Have you really inspected it properly and until it's been tried on? So there's still a bit of a question mark over that at the moment. When it comes to any clothes which are obviously tried on or handled, you're then looking in the realms of anyway. When it comes to your cleaning procedures, how are you going to be able to ensure that products have been cleaned and sanitized? There was also question marks over, going off on a little bit of a tangent, regarding shops where you might have like tailored services and things like that in relation to clothes. Obviously this would fall under the issue of social distancing as well, so it would be a service that would be difficult to provide whilst that's in place too. But certainly with clothes in shops, there are still further details that need to be sought on that.
That's great, Gavin. Thank you for that. A question just come in here is, will our shop be visited by a council representative before we open? I'm not too sure who wants to take that one. Would it be back to Gavin or Louise?
Louise? Yeah, sure. At the moment, there is no set plan, not knowing if it's specifically retail or if it relates to a food establishment, but we would encourage businesses to get in touch with the relevant departments just to go through any paperwork and controls that you've put in place, but you won't necessarily require a visit. in relation to prior to opening, so you won't need a visit to allow you to reopen. We are trying to make all of this information available, as we wouldn't have the resource to get round everybody to visit prior to reopening. But if you've got specific questions or you want to run anything by an officer, please do get in touch.
Okay, is there any advice on how best to clean and sanitise bedrooms and ensuite facilities in hotels and bed and breakfasts? Would that again be Gavin? Would that be one for you? Or indeed Catherine?
My understanding is that there is sector-specific guidance on that available from the Scottish Government website. I don't know the details of it myself, unless someone else would know in more, but there is guidance coming out for that sector.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. I do believe, and actually just after last week's webinar, there was information came online from Visit Scotland, Visit Aberdeenshire, and we think it's the hospitality guidance. And again, we'll make sure, and actually I think that the link is actually on our website, and we can actually get that sent out as well. Question here. Do we have to inform the relevant council department prior to actually opening up the premises? And maybe that's a similar one, but maybe Louise, you could give some advice there, please.
Hi, Mary. Yes, no problem. There's no requirement that you have to inform us prior to opening, but there would be absolutely no harm in letting environmental health or trading standards know that you are planning on reopening. And as I said previously, similarities to the earlier question, we can help advise on the controls that you've proposed for your reopening. So you can email environmental@aberdeenshire.gov.uk or trading.standards@aberdeenshire.gov.uk if you're purely retail.
Thank you, Louise. I've got Alistair Reid wants to come in with some more information, I think, about the Thursday coming. Over to you, Alistair.
Well, it was just more of a general appeal, going back to the various grants that are available. We've already had notification that some of them will be closing on the 13th of July, and that's the self-employed income support scheme, and also the business grant scheme, which is based on your commercial rateable value. We're hearing that we've heard that will close on the 10th of July. So just encourage anybody who hasn't applied for them, or at least have a look and see if you're eligible for them. Similarly, the newly self-employed grant scheme, which we're also administering, will also close on the 10th of July. So please have a look at the website and double check your eligibility. We have a team of staff covering the whole of Aberdeenshire economic development staff as well. So if you do need to speak to any of them, they're more than happy to speak to you about the business, how you can maybe change your business model or alter how you're trying to get to the customers. So please do give us a shout. We're more than happy to chat through things with you in the first instance and see how we can help you.
So it just really remains for me to, on behalf of the team and the panel, to thank you all very much for participating this evening. Obviously your attendance and interest is greatly appreciated by us all, and we hope that you found the event beneficial. This, as I said, the webinar will be recorded and it'll be put onto the website, and all the various bits and pieces and links of information, we'll make sure that's all on the website as well. As I say, if you have any other thoughts or questions that you wished you'd asked, please do so through the inbox, and we'll be happy to respond to you. So I'll just again thank you all very much, and hopefully you have a pleasant of what's left of the evening. Thank you very much all.